Hello and welcome back to my channel. My name is David Novak. I have been reading Henry Adams and the Making of America by Garry Wills. So far, I am enjoying the book, finding enough to sustain me, but that is largely because I only recently finished reading The History of the United States by Henry Adams. Wills is not a particular favorite author of mine, and I am not loving the book by any means, but I like very much when he talks about the practice of history, the historical method, the Boston historians, as he calls them. I wish actually the book focused on that more directly. So I would like to understand the development of the historical method in Germany, and then its spread. Came to Boston. I know about the influence of German history writing and studying through Moses Finley and the historians that he read, and some of the names crop up in this book. So Henry Adams, for instance, goes to Europe and he actually meets with Theodore Mommsen, I believe, and what's the other one? Curtius, I think. I could be getting this wrong, it's possible. But oh, look at the cat. And I would like to really know that. I have a book by Momigliano all about highly regarded historians of an earlier period, which I read and did not really have sufficient context to derive the full value from it. So I'm sure there have been books written about it. Needless to say, this trend came to the United States, centered in Boston, and then it produced a lot of great history writing, such as The History of the United States by Henry Adams, and that book which I recently hauled, mail haul, by, I think, William Prescott, about the conquest of Mexico and the conquest of Peru. That came out of that same period. And the Francis Parkman work, which I intend to read next year, also came out of that milieu. So I would like to know more about it. Henry Adams also did a stint, I think 6 years of teaching, and so I would like to read a little of that and then go into a letter by Henry Cabot Lodge. I'll just read a couple of paragraphs here at random. Well, not at random, but I won't be reading them. I won't be reading the text straight through. Through his time as, from chapter 5, Historical Method. Though his time as editor helped make Adams an historian, far more central to that formation was his simultaneous work at Harvard, where he learned about historical method by teaching it. No one knew better than he that he began with deficiencies he would have to overcome. At age 32, without a higher degree of any sort, and more specifically without formal historical training, he was expected to teach medieval history. That was less shocking then than it would be now, since the study of history was still in a pre-professional stage. Adams would be starting from scratch, but so had his older contemporary, William Stubbs, considered a founder of medieval studies in Europe. I should point out that the law had also similarly been in a pre-professional stage. So you had someone like Lincoln who learned the law simply by reading the books, then advising what kind of requirements should go into testing for a degree in the law. The very materials for study were just being opened up and would not be effectively used till the end of the century. So historians were beginning to make use of archives and the like. These scholars were trying to give a more serious foundation to the romantic medievalism made popular by Walter Scott or John Ruskin in England, by Johann von Goethe or Richard Wagner in Germany. So, the letter from Henry Cabot Lodge is quite lengthy, and, well, I'll just get into this. The picturesque side of the Middle Ages had a deep impact on one student, Henry Cabot Lodge, who took Adams's undergraduate course during his first year of teaching it, 1870-1871. But for that course, said Lodge, he would have left Harvard with no real learning experience. And then here is the letter, quoted by Wills. In all my 4 years, I never really studied anything, never had my mind roused to any exertion or to anything resembling active thought until in my senior year, I stumbled into the course in medieval history given by Henry Adams, who had then just come to Harvard. How I came to choose that course, I do not exactly know. I was fond of history, liked to read it, and had a vague curiosity as to the Middle Ages, of which I knew nothing. I think there was no more intelligent reason than this for my selection. But I builded better than I knew. I found myself caught by strong interest. I began to think about the subject. Mr. Adams roused the spirit of inquiry and controversy in me, and I was fascinated by the stormy careers of the great German emperors, by the virtues, the abilities, the dark crimes of the popes, and by the tremendous conflict between church and empire, in which emperors and popes were antagonists. In just what way Mr. Adams aroused my slumbering faculties, I am at a loss to say, but there can be no doubt of the fact. Mr. Adams has told me many times that he began his course in total ignorance of his own subject, and I have no doubt that the fact that he, too, was learning helped his students. But there was more than this. He had the power not only of exciting interest, but he awakened opposition to his own views, and this is one great secret of success in teaching. In any event, I worked hard in that course because it gave me pleasure. I took the highest marks for which I cared, as I found singularly little because marks were not my object, and for the first time I got a glimpse of what education might be and really learned something. I have never lost my interest in the Othos, the Henrys, and the Fredericks, or in the towering figure of Hildebrand. They have always remained vital and full of meaning to me, and a few years ago I made a pilgrimage to Salerno with Adams himself to see the burial place of the greatest of the popes, who had brought an empire to his feet and had died a beaten exile. Yet it was not what I learned, but the fact that I learned something, that I discovered that it was the keenest of pleasures to use one's mind, a new sensation, and one which made Mr. Adams's course in the history of the Middle Ages so memorable to me. Then it goes on to talk. Adams portrayed his own job as teaching as something of a failure in his the education of Henry Adams. But his students begged to differ, and indeed differed publicly when that book was published. Then Wills talks about some of the eminent students that passed through Adams's hands. He was offered employment at the newly established Johns Hopkins University. Failing that, Adams was asked to supply the Hopkins faculty with advice on teaching. Adams answered, "Teaching is and always must be experimental, if not empirical, in order to be successful. My only advice to my scholars who succeeded me in my branches of instruction was, whatever else you do, never neglect trying a new experiment every year." So I thought that letter by Henry Cabot Lodge was really marvelous. I think we have all had that kind of an experience. You don't expect it. You go into a class and suddenly something gels within you, and that teacher, that topic, sends you off on a whole new course. It can happen with just simply picking up a book blindly at the bookstore as well. There were a few mentions of Henry Cabot Lodge earlier in the book that I wondered the purpose of, and I realized when I came to that letter that Wills was building you up to allowing him to quote that letter in its entirety. It really is a nice piece. So I will leave that there. Thank you for stopping by my channel.